Cyclone Jude has caused considerable damage in parts of Mozambique, with flooding quite clearly visible there, erosion, buildings damaged, houses de-roofed, and many other issues, as you can see from those pictures. Well, the storm is weakening as the damage continues in Mozambique. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for March 11th. So around the world of tropics, it is actually quieting down. There are two storms active, Cyclone Jude and of course Cyclone Ivone out at sea. Jude made landfall as a Category 2 hurricane equivalent storm in Mozambique early hours of yesterday, and is now moving inland, continuing to move inland towards Malawi. In the Atlantic, it's 82 days until the hurricane season begins, and as you can see, it's a quiet picture. A significant low pressure system moving off the US East Coast out there, but elsewhere it's looking relatively quiet. In the Eastern Pacific, there's an interesting looking low pressure system off the coast of California there. It's non-tropical and not likely to become anything interesting. It is actually going to wind down as it continues to move east-southeasterly towards the northern part of the Baja California Peninsula. In the Western Pacific, not too much going on here either, just some general assorted cloud pattern there over the northern part of the South China Sea. Even the storms around the southern Philippines and Borneo have tapered off a fair bit, and so it is a rather quiet basin. Well, you may have seen it there, but in the North Indian Ocean we do have a 10% area of interest still at this point. Chances have gone down and it is not expected to form, but it will be influencing the weather there in Sri Lanka and for the southernmost part of India. So there could be some locally heavy rainfall, possibly some localized flooding. In the southwest Indian Ocean, of course, Jude moving well inland now over the African continent. Not the first storm to do so this season. And Cyclone Ivone there as well, holding on to 50 mile per hour winds despite it being sheared quite heavily. And in the Australian region, of course, Alfred is now long gone, and we're pleased about that. Elsewhere, a few storms here and there, thunderstorms that is, across the top end of Australia, out over the local coastal waters. So let's get the rundown on Jude right now. We're still giving a warning area there for inland areas of northern Zambezia, western Nampula and southern Niassa provinces of northern Mozambique. The storm still holding on to winds of 45 miles per hour estimated and a pressure estimate of 994 millibars. Currently located all of those locations there. I think I may struggle on those pronunciations, so I'll just leave that list up there. And 292 kilometers from Blantyre, which is one of the main cities in Malawi, certainly the southern part of the country. So let's check in as we do on the latest satellite imagery. This is the view from EUMETSAT, showing that the storm is still pushing westwards, and that means further inland, meaning that it's got less and less of a chance of emerging as a substantial tropical cyclone if indeed it does manage to make that turn towards the south, which was initially forecasted. But at the moment it is definitely moving further north and west than initially expected, and that means it is weakening a lot more than it would have done otherwise. Out to sea, you can see Ivone over there in the distance, still throwing up decent amounts of convection, although not exactly stacked over the low-level centre of circulation, and that is caused by some substantial wind shear on its northwestern side. But nonetheless looking good, and it has to be said that Jude is looking pretty poor at this point. Here it is looking at the close-up imagery, and you can look at this imagery as well on the Force 13 website live, and if anything, maybe even a slight hint of northerly element on that, just north of west in the last few hours. But look at the difference between the beginning and the end of this loop. Still had some deep convection at the beginning there, and only just a tiny flake of it on the western side at the end. Looking very bare indeed, and winds are probably right down there too, so probably a tropical depression very soon. Now this is Ivone. You just caught that glimpse of visible imagery at the beginning of that loop there, showing that the low-level circulation is partially exposed. It is to the northwest of where all of that convection is, so Ivone is indeed struggling too, which is not what the models originally thought it would do, although when it did eventually get going, the models did latch on to it not getting more than maybe a moderate to high-end tropical storm, and that is exactly what's happened. Still around 50 mile per hour winds at this point. Estimated central pressure 997 millibars, moving nearly due south, actually south-southwest. Here's the Atlantic looking off the US east coast, and you can see that low pressure system there centered just along the coast of South Carolina, about to move offshore, causing some significant rainfall and maybe a tiny bit of severe weather too. Eastern Pacific, a little bit of cloud down there as well, south of that low pressure system further north. Here's the Western Pacific, just a few little clusters of thunderstorms here and there, very small scale stuff around Palawan and parts of Mindanao and across Borneo. And this is the Bay of Bengal, of course, where that area of interest is down there near Sri Lanka. Actually looks quite decent there, a bit of a hint of rotation, but nothing very strong down there. Here it is on the water vapor imagery, and obviously very little time for this system. It's about to move right into Sri Lanka and then onto southern India. A wider shot of the Mozambique Channel looking at Jude, and it is throwing up some larger convective tops on the edges of the storm, obviously the areas that are over water benefiting. So that will be throwing up some significant rainfall, possibly towards Beira, just north of there at the moment. So keep looking out over there, could get some heavy rainfall coming your way. And towards the right hand side again, as we look at this wide shot, Ivone over there, really good cloud tops, but it is not exactly over the center. And this is the view across Australia. Not too much going on here now, a few storms blowing up along 80 Mile Beach and a few other small thunderstorms either side of the top end. South Pacific looking pretty quiet, a big line of convective thunderstorms there, but really nothing denoting any kind of tropical activity. Sea surface temperatures are slowly starting to pick up from their wintertime low in the Atlantic. The 26-degree isotherm now extending into the Gulf of Mexico, and also parts of the Caribbean really getting warmer, 28 degrees in one or two spots. Western Pacific also getting warmer as well, especially off the western coast of the Philippines, where temperatures are pushing up above 29 degrees. And in the southwest Indian Ocean, we have one or two spots there still pushing 30 degrees Celsius, although not quite so much in the Mozambique Channel anymore. Still good though, still plenty of time for further systems. In the Australian region, a massive pool of extremely warm waters, 31 to 32 degrees Celsius, all off the western coast of Australia. And don't forget, even in April, we can get some really strong storms in that area, so still plenty of time there too. Compared to average, that area is very much above. The southwest Indian Ocean generally above average as well, apart from where Ivone formed. And the Alfred Gap is starting to close in as well. It's starting to recover. Looking at the El Nino there, potential El Nino on the way maybe. It is getting warmer in the Nino 3-4 region near the Galapagos Islands, very much increasing. Atlantic also looking good in the tropics. Here's the oceanic heat content, where we have decent amounts of energy there to the west and to the south of Guam and the Mariana Islands, stretching towards the Philippines, and also a little spot there in the eastern Pacific, which is very unseemly for this time of year. In the South Pacific, also quite a few spots there, and actually building back up on that oceanic heat content off the eastern coast of Australia there, where Alfred was a few days ago. Still a bit of a gap there that it's got to build back up, but it is actually increasing there again. Vanuatu, Fiji, all looking good. So let's check the GFS computer model then out to 5 days, and you can see that Jude all but disappears until it moves back off the coast, and it is still going. There it is, managing to consolidate a little bit again as we get towards the end of that 5-day period, around the 14th, 15th. So coming up to this weekend, it goes on to affect the southern part of Madagascar. A much larger system, really struggles to get itself together properly, but it does manage to, looks like it does wrap up a little bit at the very end. And checking in on Ivone, and because we're showing this, I think you may have gathered that there's actually nothing else to look at across the whole tropics in the next 5 days. It's just these two systems, so it doesn't look like there's anything else on the horizon at all at this point. And they're pretty much open and chase with Ivone there. It's struggling for a while there, the northern side especially, with all that wind shear that we're talking about, and that's pretty much going to be the story of this storm throughout the rest of its track. Turns west, tries to get to Rodrigues, ultimately misses. Rainfall over the next 7 days for this region as well. I mean, it is still going to be relatively high, but nothing like what we've seen recently. So rainfall maximums there over Mozambique, on top of anything that's already happened, another 6 inches potentially, or 150 millimeters, maybe a tad more. And for the southern part of Madagascar, just that very southern tip, in fact, a little bit higher there, nearly 10 inches, that's 250 millimeters possible. And if the storm does get itself going again, dropping lots of rainfall at sea there, 350 millimeters, the highest. So looking into the moderate range, that's day 5 through to 10, there is really nothing to look at. So we're really just looking at the remnants of Jude there, turning into an extratropical cyclone, and there it is, passing down towards the southeast near Isle Amsterdam and off towards the east. So not anything else to talk about during this period of time. It does look like we're entering a big old tropical lull. Well then, scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store. I know I've been regularly breaking my promise of streaming the Tropical Weather Bulletin Marathon, but it is, trust me, on its way. Fingers crossed we don't have to change this time anymore. We are thinking it's going to be Tuesday at 6 PM UTC that we will begin the marathon on the Force 13 channel, streaming live every Tropical Weather Bulletin of the 1,000 that we've done. Well, most of them anyway. Here's the Scilly range, day 10 to 16, showing potentially a new cyclone forming in that massive hotspot off Australia, and it really takes advantage of that, at least in its size. Massive wind field there towards the end of that time period. Of course, it's still a very long way out. This is late March now that we're talking about, but it does look like that becomes a substantial tropical cyclone, moving westwards at first and then southwestwards. Looks like it will eventually miss Australia. One storm that didn't miss Western Australia was Cyclone Kirsty on this day in 1996. There it is, making landfall just slightly after landfall, that first visible image there, where it made landfall as a Category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, 115 mile/hour winds. That would make it a Category 4 on the Australian scale. We also had 2 tropical storms near Australia too. Storm Ethel off the coast of the Cape York Peninsula, off the eastern side, and Atu, which was moving through New Caledonia, following in the footsteps of Zaka, which had just done so already and had turned into a post-tropical cyclone. Well, back to today then in the Atlantic. It's starting to feel like it's getting just that little bit closer, isn't it? Andrea, the first name on this season's list. In the Eastern Pacific, it will be Alvin, and in the Central Pacific, it will be Iona. Code blue right now, 20 storms have formed so far this year, quite a lot for this time of year, only just 2.5 months gone. Western Pacific, Wu-Tip coming up, the North Indian Ocean, Shakti is the next name on the list there. In the Southern Hemisphere, we look towards the next named storms now. In Australia, the next name is Courtney, the Southwest Indian Ocean, Kanto, and in the South Pacific, it will be Tam. Hopefully we'll have another tropical weather bulletin tomorrow night. Don't see why not. We'll see you again soon.
Become an Ultimate Fan today.